Good afternoon, and thank you for coming today. I want to thank Eric Workman for providing interpretation service today. This event is being recorded for viewing at a later date, and today's webinar is for third-party administrators. If you missed the employer webinar, it should be posted to maine.gov paid leave soon. My name is Timothy Applegate. I am the Director of Finance for the Maine Paid Family and Medical Leave Program, or PFML for short. The division I see is employer facing, and my team will be available to assist with navigating Maine's new PFML program for both employers and third parties. Today, we'll be demonstrating the new paid leave portal for third parties. If time allows, we will answer some of your questions. In October of 2023, Maine became the 13th state to enact a paid family and medical leave program. Since then, a small team have been working diligently on rulemaking, managing contracts, hiring staff, and building a program from the ground up. Beginning January 1st, 2025, employers with employees earning wages in Maine, or what are called covered employees, will begin collecting PFML premiums. The premium for employers with 15 or more covered employees is 1% of wages, half of which, or half a percent, may be deducted from employee wages. Employees with fewer than 15 employees will be responsible for reporting and remitting half a percent of wages. The total amount may be deducted from employee wages. The determine on whether an employer deducts from employees rests with the employer. And when making this decision, please keep in mind that all employees must be treated equally. In addition to collecting premiums, employers will be required to remit and report wages on a quarterly basis. Starting in January, all employers with Maine or covered employees will be required to register on the Maine Paid Leave portal. Third-party administrators that will be filing on behalf of employers will also need to register on the Maine Paid Leave portal. We are currently looking at the Maine Paid Leave portal homepage. Please note that the date we have our test system set to is April 1st, 2025, since that is when Q1 filing will open. The portal will be available for registration beginning in January. To register, third-party administrators will click Register as a third-party administrator. And this screen is just asking whether you're really a third party or if you need to register as an employer. We'll hit Next. On this screen, you'll enter your legal name, DBA if one is used, and your FEIN. The next screen asks for your physical address. You'll have a chance to enter your mailing address later. You will notice the blue hyperlink at the bottom to verify the address. This ensures that the address entered matches the United States Postal Service's database. If your mailing address differs from your physical address, enter it here. If you do enter a mailing address, it will also need to be verified like your physical address. On this screen, we will do three things: create a username, set up password recovery, and also communication preferences. First, enter your name. Here we're using Granite Payroll, then email. Please note that this email will also be your username when you log in to the Maine Paid Leave portal. This step requires verification. A code will be sent to your email and can be entered here. For the purposes of the demo, we will populate the passcode. Once you have entered the code, we'll move on to a password. Passwords must be 8 characters in length, have upper and lowercase letters, have both letters and numbers as well as a special character. Once that is complete, we will set up password recovery. Select a question from the drop-down menu, and for the demo, we'll be using, what was the name of your first pet? And then you'll type an answer. If you forget your password, you will be asked this question. The next step is to set up communication preferences. Please note that you can have communication sent to the registered email or you can have it sent elsewhere. If, for example, you have a shared email address, you can have emails sent there instead of only to you. If you choose to enter another email address, it will also have to be verified. And next, please add a phone number where you can be reached. Also, the last thing to opt into is SMS messaging. This will send you an SMS if you have any unread letters on your Maine paid leave account. We will choose to opt in. And on the review screen, please review all entries, and if correct, hit submit. If something needs correcting, hit the previous button down below or click on the desired blue section that was above. This is your confirmation page, and you should keep your confirmation number. To print, click Printable View and Print. Once you have your confirmation number, hit OK. Now, this is the entire registration process that third parties are required to complete. We anticipate that it will only take a few minutes and staff will be available for assistance. And also, please note that the registration may take a day or two as there are internal verifications that will take place, so you will not be able to log in immediately. And I also want to take a second and point out that when the portal does go live, it will have an employer resources page in the bottom right-hand side. You can see those same resources now at maine.gov/paid leave. And to log into your Maine paid leave account, you'll enter your username, which is the email address you signed up with, and then enter your password. On this next step, we will set up two-factor authentication using one of three options: an authentication app, text message, or email. When you log into your Maine paid leave account, you will be required to enter a code sent to the option you select on the screen. This option can be updated later if need be. For our demo, we'll be using an authentication app. If you do have an authentication app, you will take a picture of the QR code and follow the steps on your phone, and you should receive a security code. The code will be entered here. For our demo, we will populate the number. You may also click Trust this device to skip the two-factor authentication in the future. We're now looking at the summary page of Granite Payroll. This is what you will see when you log in for the first time. This screen shows your business name, business address, and third-party services. We'll take a look at those a little bit later. We are now going to demonstrate how to set up secondary logons. To get there, we will click on the blue Manage My Profile hyperlink in the upper right-hand corner. This will bring us to where employers and third-party administrators can manage their profile, security settings such as passwords and security questions. We'll click on the More tab and find the My Users panel. And we'll click on the Manage Secondary Logons hyperlink. Now, the reason we are demonstrating this is because you, as a third party, should not be sharing logons. It is highly recommended to set up separate logons. This allows you to assign a secondary logon to the person who will be filing wage reports. If that person leaves your business, you still have access to your account. It also allows you to add new employees and remove employees who do not need access. To create a secondary logon, we will click the Add hyperlink. Here you will create their username, then you'll enter their name and email address. Please note there are two levels of access types: administrators and account managers. Administrators are able to create secondary logons and edit the access level of other secondary logons. If you create a secondary logon for a trusted employee who also manages employees, this allows them to set up logons for their employees if needed. Account managers are able to perform actions such as filing or paying, but cannot add additional logons or edit the access of other logons. So perhaps you have one person who will be filing wage reports and remit PFML contributions. They could be set up as an account manager because they do not need to create additional logons. In this case, we'll click Administrator and go to the next screen. Now, the important thing on this screen is to leave the default employer group and the account access PFML contribution boxes checked, and then we'll hit Submit. Now, staying under the Manage My Profile tab, we will now add a bank account. We can do this by clicking on the Manage Payment Methods hyperlink. This is an ACH debit payment option and is not mandatory if you use ACH credit payments. Next, we will click on the Set New Payment Method and choose a bank account type. And then here, enter the routing and account numbers to be used. And then we'll select the bank account type. In this case, it's checking. You can edit the name field, which could be helpful if you will be using multiple bank accounts. So for this, we'll name it Granite Checking. We now need to get back to the home screen, and a shortcut is to click on the green heart with the pine tree in it, and you'll be brought right back to the home page. Now we're going to demonstrate how to request access to your client's accounts. For this, we have two options. You can do single access requests or send multiple requests. We'll demonstrate requesting access to multiple clients now. And here it's just telling you can request access or remove access. And we will click on the request access to clients accounts box. And here we'll be requesting access to Sarah's Berries and Martin's Moose Lodge. And here you'll enter their email addresses. And we'll hit next. And on the review screen, you want to make sure that you have the correct number of accounts. And also your clients will have to be registered for paid family medical leave. And if they are, they will get a message on their portal account asking them to grant you access. And then we'll hit OK. After you've saved your confirmation number, of course. Now, it may take some time for your client to grant you access to their account, but don't worry if your client doesn't show up immediately. Please note that after you have been granted access to your clients, your view will change when you log in. On this screen, you have access to your clients' accounts as well as yours. If you want to file a bulk wage report, you can select your account, click File Bulk Wage Report, or as a shortcut, click the New TPA Center option. This is a one-click option to file bulk wage reports and perform other actions. We will now click the File a Bulk Wage Report hyperlink. Filers have the option to file bulk original or bulk amended returns here. To do so, add a text file with Maine PFML wage information. For our demonstration, we will upload files that produce both errors and warnings. Errors will prevent files from validating. And here we can see there's an error in the e-record for the employer record. For the employer count, there must be a 0 or 1 and the field cannot be blank. The other two errors indicate mathematical mistakes, and those would have to be corrected before the file can be validated. And now we will enter or upload a file with warnings. Warnings will indicate to the third party which employers have not registered for Maine paid leave and which employers you do not have access to. And now we'll upload a clean file. And please note, there were no error messages, which indicates a successful validation. And make sure here to verify the number of employers and the total wages, and then click submit. And here's another confirmation number. Now we are going to file a single filer quarterly wage report and need to get back to the home screen, and we'll use our shortcut. We're going to file a wage report for Sarah's Berries. This option may be useful to payroll processors for one-off wage reports or amendments. On the right side of the screen, we'll click the View and File Wage Reports hyperlink. From here, we'll click on the File Now hyperlink. For our demo, we'll be filing the first quarter of 2025. To file a wage report, you will need each employee's SSN, first and last name, and the wages earned during the first quarter. This screen is used to determine if this is the business's final report. In this case, Sarah's Berries is still in business, so we will select no. There are two options for filing a wage report. The first is manually inputting wages, and the second is uploading an Excel spreadsheet. We'll demonstrate both to you. Now, a really great function on our system is that once employers are added to a record, they remain listed as an employee in subsequent quarters. Once employees are added, you only have to edit their wages. If an employee no longer works for you, they can easily be removed. Now let's upload an Excel spreadsheet wage report. To do so, click the Download Template hyperlink. You will notice, just like the manual input, that there are 4 columns: SSN, last name, first name, and wages. The next sheet has instructions such as Social Security number should be entered with no hyphens, and that the first sheet must always be named employer wages. The name of the file can be whatever you want it to be. The third sheet is an example wage report. Please note that wages are to the nearest cent. For purposes of our demonstration, we will use a pre-filled spreadsheet. And once the wage information is entered, double check the report for accuracy and make edits as needed. The next screen asks if we want to enter a refund bank account. Sarah's Berries is not expecting a refund, so we will select no. This is the review screen. Please ensure the number of employees and wages are correct. This is the payment screen. Because Sarah's Berries does not want to be late with payment, we'll select yes to make a payment. The payment screen will display the amount due with this wage report, and the amount needs to be confirmed. We'll keep the payment date as April 1st. Here, enter the routing and account number to be used. Next, select the bank account type, and you can opt to save this payment channel for future use at the bottom. It would then be available for future payments. To confirm your submission, you'll enter your password here. And make sure to keep your confirmation code. Now, if you want a summary of wage reports, click on the period on the left. This will display the quarter, the contributions, and credits or payments. And with that, we'll go back to our home screen. Now, if you have a question about paid family medical leave, you can send us a message through the portal. The quickest way to get there is by clicking on the TPA Center hyperlink and then send a message hyperlink. Here you see an option for general questions, or you can click on an account to ask a question concerning accounts you have access to. In this case, Granite Payroll has a question about one of their clients, but they aren't listed here. So they will click on the first hyperlink. This question does not concern any of these options, so we will select Other. And here we'll ask, client does not appear in list. On the bottom left, you can also attach documents, and then we'll send the message. You will be alerted when a Maine paid leave staff member responds to your message. Now, in this case, the employer is not showing up for the third party because the access request has not been approved yet. And with that, our demonstration is complete, and we will now answer some of your questions.
All right, so we do have some questions here, and I try to categorize them. So I'll start with the first one is just a more general question. Why couldn't this be done through the reemployment, so for unemployment?
Yeah, so I can speak to that. So unfortunately, this is not reporting we could do through the existing reemployment system. That's for several reasons. One, our program is structured different, specifically with our definition of employment. The state unemployment insurance program has, I think, 17 specific exemptions of employment type that take out about 10 to 20% of employers within the state that we are expecting to cover. So our definition of employer has a much broader definition that's going to cast a wider net, probably by a factor of 10 to 20% over state unemployment. But functionally, we just can't use the reemploy me system for the functions that we need for our system because the reemploy me system is managed through a tri-state, a three-state contract, of which Maine is only one participant. So we don't have sole access to change or make changes to the reemploy me system. So we recognize this as, an additional system for employers, but unfortunately, that's the route we had to go, both with program design and functionally with the contracts that exist with the state.
So I'm just going to switch here to talk about more about the premiums. And so is it possible for employers to pay the full 1% for certain employees and 0.5% for others?
No, so the rules do clarify that if you're making the determination as an employer, you to cover the employee's portion of the premium, you have to do that for all your employees within your FEIN, except if there's a special negotiated rate between separate collective bargaining agreements. That's the only exception to that rule that we made in finalized rules.
Similar one, can employers opt out to have the employee pay the whole 1%?
No, the most an employee could ever be charged under this program is 0.5%. An employee can never be charged in more than 0.5% of their wages.
Awesome. So if a company has over 15 employees for October 1, 23 to September 30th of 24, but under 15 starting June 1st, should they deduct the 1% or the 0.5%?
So it'd be the 1%. It's whatever exists on October 1st of 2024, the 52-week look back as of that date, that snapshot in time, the 52 weeks prior to that, determine your liability for 2025. So under that scenario, it would be the 1%. But the lower threshold with the employer going under 15 would be considered when you look at your next look back period on October 1st, 2025, when you're looking back another 52 weeks prior to that date to determine your 2026 premium liability.
And then we just got one more about premiums. Can the employer cover all the premium for the employees?
Yeah, the employer has the right to not deduct anything from their employees as long as they do that for all their employees within their FEIN.
Okay. Switching topics to more bulk filing. So to confirm, we will not be able to upload a bulk file containing employers. So we don't have all access to the TPA. We won't have all that access.
So I think they're asking about warnings. Warnings will not prevent the file from uploading. It's just more informative for the third party administrator.
If TPA bulk file returns, how are payments submitted?
That can be made via ACH credit payments, and we'll be publishing that, the bank information soon and the record addendum. Or they can be remitted via ACH debit payment.
Oh, and speaking of ACH, because we only got one, so our ACH credit addendum specification available, and where on the website will we'll be able to get an account number?
They are not yet, they should be published soon, but it will conform to NACHA specifications.
Okay. Switching back, so what is the account number format going to be? Will it be a separate account from withholding account number?
Yes, it'll be a different account number. Primarily, we are relying on the FEIN. And if you have that, you can file and pay on behalf of your clients.
And I think you might have shown it. So, but what is the format for filing a wage report?
There are three. One can be manual. You can use an Excel spreadsheet in, alongside that manual upload, or you could use a text file using the bulk file specifications, which are on our website, which is maine.gov/paid leave.
Okay, so we got a couple of questions around emails and clients' emails specifically. So is a client's email the only available option for requesting access?
Yes.
Can one colleague have the same email as the user for multiple TPA accounts? Yeah, can one colleague, so I'm assuming this is within the payroll company, have the same email address as the user for multiple email accounts?
Councilman?
Yeah, for portal accounts.
Same email
Yeah.
for multiple accounts.
They can have communications sent to a shared inbox, and they can set that up during registration. But they have to have separate usernames.
Right, so what if you're an employer and a TPA? Do you have to set up more than once in the portal?
Yes, there will be rare circumstances where an employer is a TPA and they will have to have two registrations. And if you need any help with that, we'll be available to help walk you through that.
Okay. This is a question about the order in which you, I guess, create an account, but does the employer have to register before the TPA?
Not necessarily, but the employer has to be registered before the third party can request access to their account.
And speaking of requesting access, Can you speak more about the employer experience, when a TPA requests access to their account?
Yes, we did cover that in last week's webinar. The employer will get an alert on their summary page. And once they click in that alert, they will have a message that says something like, your third party is requesting access to your account. They can click in there, grant access, and then there's a couple other questions, but it should take them about a minute.
And I see Megan's hand raised. If you can, could you put your question into the chat and we can do our best to get to your question. But just moving forward, so can account managers request to add a TPA to other companies, or does it have to be an admin level account?
I don't understand the question.
Yeah, so it sounds like can account manager request to add a third-party administrator to other companies? So I'm assuming these are other companies.
Oh, if they
in
have
the
a
portal.
secondary log on, maybe, can if
Does it have to be, I guess, do you need to be an admin in order to do that?
I believe
Admin level?
so.
To request access to employers?
Yes.
No, any log on under that TPA would be able to do that.
So either administrators or account managers.
Yes.
Okay.
And then, so this question is, will insurance carriers be required to register?
They have employees? Yes.
Is there,
Any
any-
employee.
right. Right. So is there any other forms that is needed for a TPA to do?
This is it. Everything we demonstrated today is what we need to do.
More general question, will there be a recording and posted to watch at a later time?
Yes.
Is there a specific date in January when the portal goes live?
So we're not announcing it yet. We do have a date in mind. As we get closer to the hard launch, we will announce that through e-blast and probably a press release as well.
These are just more general questions, but do the warnings fail if the bulk, do warnings fail the bulk wage report file? So I guess the difference between warnings and errors.
Yeah, an error will prevent the file from validating. A warning just lets the payroll processor know that which one of their clients have not registered and which clients they don't have third-party access to.
What is the benefit to processing a bulk report versus a single wage report?
For large payroll processors, it's great because they can file multiple employers' reports at once. If you're a single employer, it's probably best just to do the manual wage report.
Will there be a unique TPA ID in the portal?
No,
Another general question, if an employee works in New Hampshire, but lives in Maine and pays Maine taxes, should they be considered a Maine employee and then pay into and then also receive the benefits?
Yeah, so that's under the localization definitions, that's kind of tied to our wage definition. And it's covered in our frequently asked question document. Currently, it's number 18, but the numbers change around as we add. But basically, it's where the employee works, not necessarily where they live. So if somebody's working 100%, physically in New Hampshire and only going home to sleep at night, they're not conducting any work in Maine, then they are a New Hampshire employee. It's where the person conducts the work. Conversely, if somebody's working 100% remotely in Maine, even if it's for a company in California, that's a Maine worker. They're performing their work in Maine. But it is a little bit more specific than that in the locality work test, because it's hard to answer the hypotheticals without all the information of a case-by-case decision. But currently, that's number 18 in our FAQ document on maine.gov/paid leave.
Just kind of going back to premiums, for the employer portion to be deducted, what is the limit for the number of employees? I mean, is there an employer limit in terms of reporting?
No, I mean, any and all employees have to be reported and premiums need to be collected and remitted for.
Can we file for an employer that is not registered and not assigned a TPA?
Yes.
And will the department do the outreach to the employer if they haven't, done an account?
We may, we would, so, again, if you file a bulk wage report and your client isn't registered, you'll receive a warning saying that so-and-so with EIN is not registered. So you could always reach out and let them know that they still need to register for paid family medical leave. We'd appreciate it.
Can an employer select their TPA when they're registered if the TPA is already registered?
The TPA has to request access. And then they can grant the access.
Is there a way to obtain a list of employers that are not registered prior to filing?
Not prior to, actually, you could validate your file without submitting it, and it would tell you which employers are not registered.
Would you consider associating the TPA client as a one-time ask using their FEIN versus their email address?
We could consider it. Yeah, I mean, we're open to good ideas.
If there's an issue with the client portal, would we be able to link them to our TPA account to review any issues with this authorization that they'll have?
Issue,
Assuming any issues with the client's portal account.
yeah, if you have third-party access, then you should have full viewable access of their account. If they are underpaid or whatnot, then you will be able to see that.
Going back to forms, will there be a form that will be filed for employers or have to be filled out for employers?
What we demonstrated here today is what needs to be done, either bulk or manual upload.
So when it comes to the main PFML premiums, and I'm assuming this is around the total premium submitted on behalf of a company. So I guess this is kind of getting to if the employer wanted to do the whole 1%, they can just deduct and submit into the.
Yeah.
Or, okay,
Yeah, we're not keeping track of the employer versus employee deductions.
okay. Will there be penalties for not filing for a certain quarter?
Yeah, so the penalty is covered in our FAQ as well. I can find the question number as I'm talking about it, but essentially it could be a 1% of quarterly wages, is the penalty that's prescribed in, statute, and rule. But we do allow for notification process. So if somebody is late filing, they'll get a notification once they're late through the portal, that they filed later, they haven't paid their remittances yet. And they'll have a period of time in that letter, and that will most likely be 15 days through which they have to file and remit their payments. As long as they do that, the penalty is not assessed. But if somebody does fail to either submit a wage report and or pay premiums, the penalty as prescribed by statute and rule is 1% of total quarterly payroll for that quarter.
Do you accept paper filings?
Short answer is no. There can be considerations made for certain circumstances, such as somebody who lives in a very rural Maine and has no access to internet per se. But we'll address those on a case-by-case basis.
Just seeing if there are any more questions. I guess I can start with this one. Would our clients use nationwide employees or Maine employees to determine the employee count?
When they're doing the count, you only count the Maine-based employees.
Does an owner of a company who take payroll need to also pay for PFML or can they opt out?
Yeah, so it depends on the corporate structure, but if you are a self-employed owner who is also the employee of for your own company and you're drawing a wage from your company as an employee, those wages are subject to PFML, and you as a person need to be included in your employee count. And the most clear example I've been saying is like an S corp. So if you're an owner of an S corp, and you're also an employee of that company and you earn a reasonable wage as a salary, those wages, that you're paid as an employee are subject to PFML, and you are a quote unquote covered employee that needs to be included in your employee count. If you're a sole proprietor and you don't pull any wages from traditional wages from your company, you're not an employee of your company, and your sole income is your profit minus loss, then you're a self-employed individual, and you can elect into coverage if you choose to, but you're not automatically covered in that scenario.
Is there a resource to teach how to generate a text file or TXT file?
No, we do not have any resources like that. If you have a payroll processor, they should be doing that on your behalf. If you're a single employer, then you'd want to use the manual, but if you are a third party and are struggling with building that file, you probably want to reach out to your software company.
We have just under 20 minutes left, so there's still time to get your questions in. But if a client has multiple entities, will they need to use a different email address for each account?
So when people register for the portal, it's by FEIN. So you do need a distinct, email for each account. I'm not sure if that's what that is asking.
Oh yeah, I think we got, oh no, this is a new one. Yeah, the warnings, fail the bulk wage report file. If not, do warnings result in tax notices or suspended payments and filings?
If an employer is not registered, then yes, their payments and reports would suspend in our system, but they're still considered timely. It's not based on when we process, it's based on when we received the files.
We got that. See, we're just combing through to make sure we've captured all the questions. So I guess, this one is saying, we don't have a presence in Maine. Does registering as a TPA create a liability account?
It doesn't. So if you're a third party and you process payroll for a Maine company, but you don't have any Maine-based employees, then you would have no filing requirements for your business.
This question is, if an employer has 15 or more employees, will this system automatically apply the 1% rate to determine the balance due, or does the employer use a different portal for their share?
When you register a business, it'll ask you about your employee count, and from there, it will calculate your premiums rate.
Right, so if you're reporting 15 or more, your liability will auto calculate as 1%. If you're reporting less than 15 employees, it'll be calculated at 0.5%.
This might go to the portal, but it's more about collective bargaining agreements. So can you explain the rule about collective bargaining unit employees? So teachers included in that?
Yeah, so, well, all employees in Maine are included in this, with the exception of federal employees and a couple other random exclusions. I might as well say them. So the only exclusions we have in our law are for federal employees, incarcerated people earning wages, qualified volunteers, students through work-study programs, not traditional jobs, but work-study income, and then railroad workers. Every other employee in Maine is covered, including public workers, private workers, and teachers are included in that. In terms of collective bargaining agreements, for public collective bargaining agreements only, this is not a private collective bargaining agreement. But in statute, there is a carve out that if a public sector collective bargaining agreement was in existence on 10/25/23, any employees and employers are exempted from this law until that collective bargaining agreement expires for the first time. So the first end date on the collective bargaining agreement that was in effect on 10/25/23, employers are not liable for those employees. Those employees should be left off the wage reports, if you have, if you know, if you're an employer with several CBAs and you have one that hasn't expired yet, leave the ones that are outside the law off your wage reports until it expires for the first time. So for instance, if you had a collective bargaining agreement for teachers that was in effect, July 1st, 2023, so on 10/25/23, it was in effect, and then it expires on July 1st, 2025. The start date essentially for those employees is July 1st, 2025. Their premium liabilities begin on that date. And that is covered in our FAQ document on our website, maine.gov/paid leave.
What should an employer do if we do not deduct the Maine PFML from employees' pay until February? Can we go back and deduct the premiums from January from missed contributions?
No, the way the rules were finalized is that you cannot deduct retroactively for premiums. If an employer has failed to deduct, they're responsible for paying that portion of the employee's premium that they missed. The only exception to that is if you have a zero paycheck in like cash industries for like hospitality workers, you can retroactively go back and cover the premium. But if a payroll deduction was missed, the employer is opted to pay for the employee.
Oh, can you go back up? There's one question about something related to the employee count and the honor system. I just saw it. That's okay. Oh yeah, so for the employee count, will Maine keep track of the employee count each year, or is it on an honor system for employers to update it every year?
Did we cover when they update it in the system? Probably good to review.
Yeah, it will be every year on Q3. We'll do two things. One, if an employer is filing a wage report manually, the question will be asked about their employee count. For third parties, in the e-record location 191, it's a 0 or 1 to indicate less, fewer than 15 or 15 or more. And that will be evaluated in the third quarter as well.
So what happens, kind of getting back to the count, what happens if your employee count fluctuates per quarter? Say for a company that's a temp hire company, if they supply the temporary employees for other.
Well, that's why we do the full year look back period. So as of October 1st, every year, you look back the 52 previous weeks. And then you count if you were an employer of 15 or more for 20 or more of those weeks. And that was changed in between first and second draft of rules to account for fluctuations in seasonal businesses, to try to make sure that there's a longer look back period to account for, employers that might balloon for a couple months in the summer, not creating a higher liability than, they should have reasonably.
This is one comment I'm seeing. Requesting TPA through an email is very unfeasible for large payroll providers. This should be done through a client's FEIN in order to ensure timely and accurate filings. I can see many clients pushing back or giving us incorrect emails.
That is the reason for payroll processors that we will not reject your file for unregistered employers.
Okay, is there a way for TPAs to know what employers indicated in their headcount when they're registered?
Yeah, if they have third-party access on the employer summary page, it will show what their rate is. It may not tell the exact number, but it will tell if it was less or more than 15.
We have about just 11 minutes left. So as a TPA, if an employer registers with an incorrect count of employees, is there a way for us to adjust that without the employer so it's calculated accurately?
We would have to do it internally. So if there is that mistake, you'd have to reach out to us so we can change that rate internally.
Does an out-of-state government employer with an employee working remotely in Maine have to participate? So less than 15 and we do not contribute to Maine unemployment?
Without knowing the specifics, yes, is what it sounds like. Any Maine employee, if they're working 100% remotely within the state, they're a Maine employee, not contributed to Maine unemployment is not the determining factor, because there are many employers who are exempt from unemployment insurance that are not exempt for PFML. So with the limited information in that answer or question, I would say yes, they're a Maine employee. They're liable for premiums. I agree with the assessment that if it's just one employee, the employer is less than 15, because you're only counting your Maine-based employees.
So this is moving to private plans. So, if the exemption will be filed and likely approved, is the company still required to do the withholding and file for the first quarter? Are they able to file the exemption? Will they be refunded if the exemption is approved?
So the private plan substitution process is beginning April 1st, 2025. And the start date of an exemption is relative to when it's approved, but it will not be retroactive to a previous quarter. So everyone is going to be liable and owe first quarter premiums, and there will not be refunds for first quarter. When the substitution is approved, it may retroactively go back to the start of the quarter in which the substitution was filed in, and it depends on when it was filed and when it was approved. The language is a little bit complex. I would refer to rule for that. But the intention is not for payments to be made to the state that then need to be refunded by the state to the employer. We don't want to get in that situation. So the way we word it in rule is it kind of segments it by quarter, but to that piece, the substitution process does start April 1st, 2025. Going forward, first quarter will be owed by everybody and are non-refundable.
The state previously said that they will use a customer email from the bulk uploads to reach out to the customers to register for PFML. Based on Tim's earlier response, are you stating that this will no longer be done and TPAs hold the responsibility of getting their client registered?
Oh, yeah. So in the EU record, we are asking for contact information. And we may use that information to reach out to unregistered employers. If you know who they are and you want to reach out on our behalf, feel free to ask your clients to register.
Okay, so this is an interesting one. So on the question about emails, say one person owns 3 companies and they registered 3 EINs, but only have 1 email address.
You know, I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah, it says on the question about emails, so let's just say one person owns 3 companies and they have to register 3 EINs, but only have 1 email address to do it.
They would need 3 separate email addresses to create 3 separate logons. They can send all of their communication to that shared email address that they use the most if they want.
Okay, so if we take on new employees and exceed the 15 employee count, when does the percentage change from 0.5 to 1%?
Yeah, so the employee count occurs on October 1st of each year. So the first count happens, October 1st, 2024. And the count that takes place on that day, with the 52-week look back, determines your premium liability for the next year. So the count that happened on 10/1/2024, looking back, 52 weeks is what determines your 2025 liability. The count that you conduct on 10/1/2025 will determine your 2026 liability. So you enter your first count when you register for the portal for 2025, and then you update that count every year as part of your quarter 3 wage reporting for your next calendar year liability.
Can you address PEOs and the way they handle registrations and reporting?
Yeah, so PEOs, we're treating kind of like a third-party administrator. We do not see the PEO as the employer. The employer under our law is the client company. That is in our rule. The definition of an employer actually addresses PEOs directly. So we see the client company as the employer because that's more favorable for the employer, obviously, the smaller size. But that is covered in our definition of employer in our rules.
So for amended returns, if one employee needs correcting, should I submit all the employee information or just the one specific employee?
all. If you file one person, it'll look like you're amending, let's say you have 5 employees, you'll amend down to that 1 employee and only their wages will be reported. And that would or result in a large refund and then lots of questions and then another amendment return. So yes, please report all employees and just change those employees whose wages are incorrect or add or remove employees.
We have about 5 minutes left, but we got another interesting question. So why is the rule different from the statute on penalties? Statute says it's 1% of an employer's total annual payroll for each year of non-compliance. The rule says total payroll for the quarter.
Yeah, it's a 1% annual payroll. We actually tried to break it down into quarters, so we're not whacking people for a whole year for non-compliance.
Can a short-term disability company opt out as we have a disability plan? And if so, how should we do it? Kind of gets the private plans.
Yeah, private plan substitutions begin April 1st, 2025.
Is Maine PFML reported on the W-2 box 14?
Yeah, we recommend, it's in our FAQ, but I'm pretty sure it's MEPFML. I can verify that real quick, is what we're suggesting for box 14.
Is there a direct phone number for PFML, please?
There will be soon.
So do we count employees that are only paid once or twice a year? Example, our firefighters are paid in January and in June.
Yes, any wages earned in the state are subject to PFML, no matter how little, unless the person's a volunteer with a nominal fee, is the only kind of exception to that.
Will you publish step-by-step instructions for employers to register and approve TPAs? And if so, when will that be available?
Yes, we will, and it should be available soon.
Within a week or 2, I believe, yeah.
Okay, we got about 3 minutes left. This one question I see here is, what is the rationale behind capping earned payouts? If the employer and the employee both have to pay in at total wages, but employees making more than the threshold are capped, where do excess funds go?
Wait, sorry, read that one again.
Yeah, so the earned payouts. So what is the rationale behind capping earned payouts? If the employer and the employee both have to pay in at total wages, but employees making more than the threshold are capped, where do excess funds go?
Well, they all go into the trust fund, and I mean, it's a social insurance model, so they're not individual funds, they all pool into one trust fund. In terms of why benefits are capped and why is there, the social security cap on wages, that's all statutory limitations, that's how the statute was written.
Okay. This one says, my software company said they can't put MEPFML. It will, on box 14, it will take only 4, for example, PFML.
Yeah, so we did talk to other states and we just followed basically what every other state does, which is the 2 letters of their states and then PFML. This is the first time I've heard that, but Connecticut does do CT PFML, Maine will do MEPFML, and it's just a recommendation.
All right, so most of the systems we work with, both in Maine and the other 49 states, use an EIN as the information of record instead of an email address. Can you speak as to why everything keys off a changeable email address instead of an EIN?
Everything does key off the EIN. You only need the email address to request access.
And to receive correspondence too, but you do register with your FEIN, that's how we track employers in the system. Yeah.
We have just about 1 minute left. Oh, and someone asked, can you please repeat the box 14 label?
Yeah, so I do have it right here. It's number 25 currently in our FAQ document. We are recommending for box 14 in the W-2 as MEPFML.
And this will be the last question, but why aren't exemptions being accepted until after the first quarter? A large employer is paying in a sizable amount of funds that you won't be refunding.
Yeah, we do have a response to comments around that in the basis statement. I would point people to it. It's for many reasons.
Okay. All right. So we are now at time. I just want to thank everybody for joining us this afternoon. And again, this recording will be posted on our webpage on paid family and medical leave. And I hope everyone has safe travels and have a great rest of your afternoon.